This is a Flying Cow production.
There was a man named Worrell, Ernest Worrell. Let's celebrate this champion.
Well, hello and welcome back to Around the Worrell, our podcast here on the Flying Cow Patreon, where we talk all things Ernest P. Worrell. I, of course, am your host, the Flying Cow himself, Clay Johnson, and here with me once again is my co-host, the litigator himself, Loren Collins. Loren, how are you, sir?
I'm excited to go back to school here today, Clay.
Right. Here we are, getting ready to talk about this next Ernest film. We've kind of been dreading getting into these straight to DVD ones, but we are today talking about Ernest Goes to School. We said last time that, we were getting into territory that neither of us had seen and, getting into some new stuff. But here's the thing. Halfway through this movie, I realized I've seen this movie before.
It's funny you should say that. By the time we got to the end, when they have like the big climactic football game,
Yeah.
parts of that felt really, really familiar. Like I don't have a recollection of watching this film, but that felt
Sure.
so familiar. I must have seen it somewhere.
Yeah. I mean, it's possible that you just saw like clips or bits or something like that. And here's the thing. I knew that this was one that, I will say it did actually get a theatrical release. Now in very limited markets, though. I think it
cities,
was,
if I recall correctly.
it was only in, I believe, like Ohio, Tennessee, Kentucky. Oh no, here we go. The film received a limited theatrical release in Cincinnati, Cincinnati, Ohio, and Louisville, Kentucky. So just those two cities. You're right. But yeah, so a very limited release, but not really much to speak about. But it's the last film that got any sort of theatrical release. And once again, I mean, on this one, they don't even release the box office for this one because, it was only in two cities.
It didn't have a national release. Who knows how many theaters it was even in two cities? It might have been in two theaters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, like I was saying, this was not one that I would have seen previews for. So the only way I knew that this was even out was that I was just in fact, I'm pretty sure I did rent this, but I'm pretty sure we rented it from, you remember, like, there used to, like, there would be like a pharmacy or something. And occasionally they would have like just a couple of shelves of videos or DVDs that you could rent.
Yeah.
Like a lot of like, smaller businesses, even in gas stations, would occasionally have, just as like a side hustle, like a little place where you could rent videos from. And I'm pretty sure that I rented this from some sort of little supermarket or something like that.
The proto red box of its day. Yes.
Yeah. And so, but like I said, I knew that I had rented this, but I had no memory of the film itself. So I thought, I think I started it and never finished it or something like that. But as we watched through, I was like, no, I've seen this whole movie. I might not have watched to the very end, but I watched almost the entire thing because I remembered good bits of it as I was rewatching it.
Yeah.
I did not remember it until I rewatched it, but which isn't necessarily the sign of a great film, But I will say, do you have any sort of history with this at all? Did you know that this was out before, obviously, later on when you just could see the list of Ernest movies and things that came out. Were you aware of this when it came out at all?
I may have been.
Uh-huh.
Like I think I had the vaguest recollection of like Slam Dunk Ernest existing. Like
Okay.
when it came out direct to video. I know
I think I saw that like as a preview on a DVD.
or DVD somewhere.
Yeah, like a preview on a DVD.
Back in that day, it might have been a preview on a
Else.
VHS, to be honest. But
Oh well, yeah. Honestly, yeah. I'm saying DVD is shorthand, but it almost absolutely was
something you had to actually fast forward through. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like I probably like knew Slam Dunk Ernest existed. I honestly don't remember at the time being aware that Africa or Army existed.
Okay.
Um, if I was aware this film existed in the 90s, and I very well may have, I just did not retain that memory.
Okay.
It's just gone at this point. Yeah.
Sure. I mean, like I said, this was released straight to video at a time when release straight to video
Yeah.
really meant something. It really meant that, okay, well, very few people are going to see this.
Yeah.
It's really just for a niche market that care enough to look for it.
I will say it, if I'm just playing the odds here, there's a better chance I heard about this film at the time than I did about Ernest Rides Again. Because I'm confident I had no awareness of Ernest Rides Again.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, like I said, I did end up seeing this, and I actually have a really interesting backstory about this film because, I was a kid who loved Ernest films.
Mhm.
And so I remember I have a distinct memory of being on my bus, and this would have been around 91, so probably right after the release of Ernest Scared Stupid.
Mhm.
On my bus, just creatively thinking about what they could do in future Ernest movies and coming up with an idea for Ernest Goes to School.
Yep.
And then when this film came out, like 3, years later, I was like, could they hear me?
Yeah.
Did they know? In my child brain, I'm
Yeah.
thinking there's no way that they would have come up with Ernest Goes to School without knowing what I had come up with. I
Yeah.
mean, obviously, when you sit down and you think about it, I'm surprised they didn't do Ernest Goes to School sooner. I mean,
Mhm.
even as a kid, I was like, I don't know how they haven't done this. This would be a great movie. They need to do Ernest Goes to School. And I will say I don't remember any sort of plot that I had for it. Just the idea that they should do a film about Ernest in school, because that
Yeah.
just kind of seemed like a natural fit for the character and the way that he was portrayed. But yeah, honestly, for years I was convinced that somehow they had found out about my idea to make this movie.
File your lawsuit. Try to collect on it.
Yeah. I came up with this idea in 91.
Yeah, exactly.
When did you come up with it?
Yes. You should also
Yeah.
get residuals for Billy Madison, because that wasn't until a year after this.
Yeah.
But yeah, Ernest was ahead of the curve on that. Ernest inspired Adam Sandler. That's what.
Yeah. Oh, I believe it. I mean, honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Adam Sandler had, was at least aware of some of the. I mean, now maybe not this one, but at least aware of the Ernest films.
Yeah.
But yeah, so getting into this, I was definitely dreading kind of watching this.
Oh yeah.
And I mean,
that's what I expressed last episode, was that
Sure.
I'm getting everything from here on out, honestly. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and not to give everything away from the start, but to be honest, after watching this, my main takeaway was it wasn't bad. It was kind of likable.
Mhm.
I did not, there are definitely some issues with it, and we'll talk about it.
Mhm.
But overall, I felt I was like, this mostly. There are definitely some times where it steps away.
Yeah.
But this feels like a classic Ernest film.
And
This really, in fact, a lot of the beginning, and there are some obvious corollaries, some obvious connections that it's like, okay, I know exactly why I feel this way. But some things, it just kind of gives a similar feeling as Ernest Goes to Camp for me, especially in the beginning, a little less as it progresses and really creates its own
Yeah.
story, but a lot in the setup because we have Ernest as, again, a custodian
Mhm.
for, a big gathering of children.
Yep.
And also, him kind of walking around creating mayhem and being unaware of the mayhem he's creating
Yep.
in that opening sequence.
He's
And
specifically doing plumbing work, which I'm pretty sure is recycled from camp. Yes.
yeah, well, I mean, but he specifically is dealing with a leak,
Yeah.
not a toilet.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it honestly, there are definitely those similarities that I was like, okay, yes, this is a definite touchstone. This is definitely something that specifically reminds me of camp. And but also, he is has a um ridiculous sense of importance to
Mhm.
characters that are constantly making fun of him, which
Yeah.
is very also reminiscent of camp. I will say, though, in this one, the bully characters don't suddenly join their side.
Yeah.
They are just straight up bullies, which, by the way, I will say, and I didn't pull a picture for this, but I don't care. This was the first film to feature Will Sasso.
Mhm.
He is one of the bully characters. I believe it's what are their names? It's like
Oh yeah. They
Russell and Brad.
okay. Yes. He's
Which is
Russell.
huh?
Will Sasso is Russell. Yeah.
Yes, Will Sasso is Russell, even though the guy who played Brad is named Russell
Russell.
Porter. Yeah, I thought that was funny. But yeah, I was like, you know, those characters are just straight up bullies. They're never redeemed
Yeah.
to the point that I was like, okay, something needs to happen to these guys
Yeah.
because there's a scene in which they literally set Ernest on fire in the middle of class.
Yeah.
And then the other one throws a fire extinguisher at his head. Zero repercussions.
It
And
has a very 1980s attitude towards bullying, which is just like get over it, kid.
yeah, rub
He's
some
a
dirt on
grown
it.
man.
You'll be fine. Yeah. And I was just
Built
like,
character.
I mean, the closest they get to a comeuppance is, they, along with the whole rest of the football team, get knocked out and their uniform stolen, and then the band wins the game for them.
Yeah.
But they don't
As you were
personally get a
as you were
comeuppance
talking
like
about the
they really
bullies,
should.
I realized like I couldn't immediately off the top of my head remember what the resolution to that subplot was.
Because there really isn't one.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, honestly, that's kind of, I talked about there are issues with this film, and that kind of brings us there.
Yeah.
There are so many things in this film that are paper thin and really just there for lip service. Like, there are a lot of other characters in this film who have absolutely zero character.
Yeah.
Honestly, there are really, aside from Ernest himself, obviously, only a few other definable characters, and most of them are, really just kind of archetypes.
Yeah.
Or they're defined because of the way another character defines them. But you've got Ernest's school friends. You've got Donald, Rodney, and Maisie. Maisie, by the way, played by Sarah Chalk in her film debut. She had already debuted as the second Becky on Roseanne in the same year. But yeah, honestly, these three characters, not only do they really have no definable character, but the little bit of definition that they give them changes. The first time we are introduced to Donald is when Ernest has already been signed up to go to school, and we see this random long-haired, red-haired kid come up. We can't even see his face because he's just completely profile and nobody told him to turn out.
Yep.
And he's just like, "Good luck, Ernest." And I wrote down, I was like, I can't see who this kid is. Is he supposed to be important?
Yeah, was that Donald? Yes,
Yeah.
I wrote this down in my notes. Who is Glasses Kid?
Yes. Yes. Who is this random encouraging kid? And then all of a sudden we're introduced to the fact that he's one of Ernest's best friends.
Yes.
But he's really given no other defining characteristics after that besides he's Ernest's friend.
Yeah, it almost makes me wonder if that was something where they had shot a scene and then just cut it without thinking about.
I
like,
was about
they
to
needed
say,
that scene.
I feel like, but again, none of these, then we have the character of Rodney, who also gives the school announcements. And I will say, I find his giving the school announcements very actually interesting in it, and sometimes entertaining.
It was a nice beat. I thought it would have come back later, but at least for a comedic beat for 30 seconds or whatever, I liked it.
Well, they do it throughout. They at least do it 2 or 3 times.
Wait, that's not what I mean by that. I thought that there just might have been a payoff to that.
Oh, yeah, sure. But again, we're kind of randomly introduced to the fact that he's Ernest's friend, which is really only tipped off the first time by him in the announcements welcoming Ernest to school.
Yeah,
basically. And then Maisie, poor Sarah Chalk, is given absolutely nothing. She's first introduced after Ernest has started classes, and she's in band, and she's introduced seemingly as a love interest, as a possible love interest for Donald.
Yep.
But Donald's just like mooning over, and she's like, she doesn't even know I'm alive. And then the next time we really, we see her in a couple of scenes after Ernest gets smart, and her kind of like, along with all of the other kids that don't know Ernest, kind of being like, oh, this guy's kind of cool. And then all of a sudden, randomly, after Ernest loses his smarts, she's with Donald and Rodney saying, you need to study for the test. I'm like, suddenly these three are all friends?
Yeah.
When did they become the group?
Yeah.
Because the whole idea of, because they pitch it as, oh, we're going to see possibly a love story budding between Donald and Maisie, because that's the way they pitched her, as this love interest that doesn't really know, might not really know Donald.
Yeah.
And then suddenly they're a friend group, and that's just what they are. They're a friend group.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, so we just completely redefined her character. Doesn't really matter because we never adequately defined her character to begin with.
Yeah.
But I'm just like, they really had no game plan here with these characters.
No. No, and to be honest, I'll go ahead and say this. I had a lot of issues. We'll get to that here in a second in the beginning. Yeah. Which is nonetheless overcome by the fact that my general impression of this entire film is not that distant from yours. Like I on the whole liked it, honestly. When I logged this on Letterboxd, I don't typically rate films on a scale of 1 to 5 unless I feel strongly about it. But no, I still said I liked it. I got to the end of this film, and it's like that was pleasant hour and a half of my time. It was fine.
And I will say, I think part of that might just be that I was expecting something so much worse,
Yeah.
and it was, like I said, likable.
Well, and this is why I bring it up now, is because the it always helps for me if I'm going to ultimately give a film a thumbs up or a thumbs down if it
Sure.
ends well. And I thought that
Yeah.
the latter half of this film, even maybe the full act 2 and 3, were fine for an Ernest film. They were good. Like, I enjoyed the football game thoroughly, honestly.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, honestly, there were at least 3 moments where I laughed out loud.
Yeah. Um,
And honestly, I can't necessarily say that for all of the Ernest films that I like.
Yeah.
You know?
So I say all this to preface that even though on the whole I liked the film, even though like I thought it ended strongly, the first act of the film, like you're describing, has a bunch of issues where stuff just isn't set up properly and like things are still being worked out. Like beyond what you were saying about the characterization, I wasn't even clear for the longest time what the characters' names were.
Sure.
Because they just straight up weren't introduced properly on screen.
No.
I mean, I think Maisie might have been because they're having to like refer to her.
Right. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think she's the one character that when we see her, we hear her name.
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, Rodney, I'm reminding myself of his name by looking at the Wikipedia page.
Exactly. Yeah, I had to.
Donald does get named check eventually, but not until he's appeared on screen like 2 or 3 times.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a problem when he shows up the first time and he hasn't been. Well, obviously, if he shows up the first time, he hasn't been seen before, but he shows up
Right.
already knowing Ernest, having a pre-established relationship.
And he walks into the scene like we're supposed to know who he is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's just all kinds of just sloppiness in the first act of this film that I think then settles down a little bit. Honestly,
Sure.
I don't think the film needs Rodney and Donald. Like, you could get by with one of those two characters.
We don't need Donald at all.
Yeah,
I mean, I think maybe we make Rodney, also give him the announcement stuff because that is entertaining.
announcement stuff.
But then also kind of give him like a regular easygoing personality to go along with that.
That's fine.
And I mean, if we're gonna do, number one, if we're gonna do the Maisie love interest subplot, let's actually do it and not just introduce it and then drop it.
Yeah.
But
I can see how you play
those
that.
two would have been fine as love interests if
Yeah.
we were going to go that direction.
Th-
Or if she's going to be a friend, let's just introduce her as one of Ernest's friends and not just suddenly change who her character is halfway through. I
Yeah.
will say, I want to go ahead and just kind of give a cursory for people who haven't seen this movie. A cursory. I really should start doing this before we get into this stuff, but I'm going to go ahead and do it now. So, for anyone who hasn't seen the rough outline of this, and just like most Ernest films, the plot is a little ill-defined, but I can give you the basic outline. So basically, Ernest is the custodian for this school, Chickasaw Falls High School, and basically he there is a guy who wants to shut down the school, and he basically keeps throwing all of these hurdles at the principal, and one of the ones that he throws at him is all staff have to be high school graduates. Well, Ernest is not a high school graduate, so basically it's given to Ernest. You can either go back to school and earn your diploma, or we have to fire you. So Ernest decides to go back to school, but he isn't doing very well. So, he's looking for some help. And eventually we are introduced to Goethe and Bobby, played by Bill Burge. Goethe played by Linda Cash from the last film. And basically, they are scientists who have created this machine that's supposed to make you smarter. So they put Ernest through their machine. Ernest ends up being very smart, but ends up kind of offending his friends because he, in this new persona, he's kind of, a little stuck up. And eventually that fades, the machine gets broken, and Ernest has to find a way to still pass his classes and fulfill all of his other commitments without the extra help. That is the plot in a nutshell.
Yeah.
But like I was saying,
Oh, and did you mention they have to win the football game, like, to save the school?
well, but that's not introduced until the football game starts.
Yeah.
That's the
Well,
thing.
I mean, the saving the school plot is there from the beginning. The fact that the
Yes.
football game is what it hinges on is the football game is what comes
Right.
into it. Yeah.
Yeah. And here's the thing. I want to go ahead and I want to talk about this because first of all, the villain in this film, let's see,
Go ahead.
is Mr. Axwell, I believe, played by Kevin McNulty, who you might not know the name, but you've seen in a few things. He's a Canadian actor who can be seen in a bunch of different stuff. Time Cop, Snakes on a Plane, Fantastic Four, both Fantastic Four movies, apparently. I think the first two. But he often plays a villain or some sort of, jerk type character. But it's the idea that he wants the school to shut down is introduced, like you said, immediately on meeting his character.
Mhm.
What's never introduced is why. He never really gives a reason for why he wants to shut the school down.
Yeah.
Like I said, this reminded me a lot of Camp. This was one of the things that reminded me of Camp. But
Yeah.
with Camp, we knew exactly why they wanted to take over that camp. We knew why they wanted to buy the camp because of, petricite, I believe is the name of the mineral.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mineral. Which again, why they weren't just looking for petricite in Avatar, I don't know, because we know exactly what petricite does. It helps the space program and the arms movement or whatever. it helps for those things. But
Or it takes place in the Ernest verse. It should.
yes, yeah, absolutely. But like I said, with this movie, we have no idea. We know, like, we get the idea that this guy's villainous. We get that he wants to shut the school down, but we're never given a personal angle for why he is so intent. He's so intent on shutting this school down. It seems so important to him that he's willing to work together or to incentivize. Bribe. Thank you. Bribe the high school coach to blow the game. Because here's the thing, we're introduced in the first opening sequence. It looks like this school's not good at anything, and then immediately after that, as Ernest is talking to the football player bullies, they're like, oh, but we haven't lost a game all season. I'm like, if they haven't lost a game all season, why the hell is this guy trying to shut down? Because no school, like, football is a big thing. If you've got a successful football team, people are going to be supporting your school. That's just the way things often work. If you've got a thriving sports program, you're going to get support for your school because that brings in, fans, people who are interested, who want to see the games. That's going to bring in money, for the school. And so, which it also doesn't make sense. There are times that they show, I think during the first game that we see, that there's a bunch of empty seats. I'm like, this doesn't track, guys. They're a very successful team that has no fans and no support from their school district.
How many
That
extras
makes
they
no
could afford
sense.
that day is the problem. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think I generally took it as, stock, movie plot of, they're trying to save money, consolidate schools. They specifically talk about consolidate.
Well, yes, he does.
So,
But again, they've got a successful football team.
Yeah.
They have something that would kind of tag this school as one you'd want to save. So
Yeah.
it just makes sense that he would have a personal agenda for
Yeah.
wanting to shut down this school specifically. And
Yeah.
he doesn't, which to me makes it make less sense.
Yeah. I admit that didn't bother me as much. I think
Sure.
just like
I mean, honestly, it really
didn't
didn't bother me until the end when he bribed the coach. I was like, he's riding hard for this.
Yeah.
I feel like there's got to be some personal reason, and there isn't.
Yeah. I admit to some extent, as you describe it all, that honestly helps me a little bit at the end when the fate of this school rides on the football team winning a championship, because that really shouldn't matter on the whole, like in terms of like the academics. But
Yeah.
like you say, if the football team is going to make it the school more financially viable, whatever it brings in, then sure, fine. The championship, I guess, does that.
Because as the principal says to the school board member, no thinking school board member is going to shut down a school with a championship team.
Yeah.
Again, no thinking school board member is going to shut down a school with a successful athletic program at all.
Yeah. By the way, what was his name again?
Who?
Uh,
Mr. Axwell, I think,
Axwell.
something like
Was
that.
Axwell's job ever defined?
No.
Yeah,
No, see, that's another thing. I'm like, is he
the
working
issue.
for the school board? Is he working for the superintendent's office? Yeah, no. That was
I was
another
like,
thing. I was like,
that's
I
the
don't know
issue
who
for me,
he
and
is.
his motivation is just what is Axwell's power?
I was like, is he going to get money if he can close this school?
Oh yeah.
Even if it had been as ill-defined as that, like I get a bonus for every school I close. Cool.
Yeah. If he closes down
that's
5
enough.
schools, if he closes down 5 schools, he gets a free sub.
Right. And this is the last one.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just,
Also,
I mean, that wouldn't define why he needs to close down this school in particular, but it would at least give us motivation for why he's so gung-ho for having to shut down a school.
Yeah.
At all. So, yeah.
We need a dark flashback of him, his days at this school.
Yeah. I mean, even if they
be somewhat in character with this film.
I mean, if they had given him like a Weasley assistant or something that he could have like just told, like, if I get one more school, I'll get a raise, or I'll get a promotion or something, but nothing.
He could just make a phone call. Honestly, we could just see him on the phone describing his plot to someone we don't need as an extra character in this film.
Right. And all this is to say, Kevin McNulty is not doing a bad job. Like I said, he's a guy that you would recognize from a lot of things.
Yep.
But the character is so ill-defined, and as an ill-defined, two-dimensional just villain, he comes off as a villain. He's doing his job.
Yeah, he's doing fine.
But there's nothing really special about it because there's no real stakes. To it.
Let me take this opportunity to say, like, in addition to McNulty's performance there as Mr. Axwell, not even sure if he has a first name. He's just listed as Axwell here.
Mr. Axwell.
Mr. Axwell. He's doing the assignment. He's pulling off the villain role perfectly good. I like the principal too. The thing is, for the most part, I like the performances in this film. But by and large, they're all
at least they're just flat and ill-defined.
They're flat as written. Yes, I mean the script could use another draft or two.
Yeah,
but the performances they're giving on screen,
the performances are it's like, honestly, the principal is one of those characters that I'm like, I would like to know more about this guy.
He was kind of fun, yeah. No, but
Yeah.
compared to like what we saw in Ernest Rides Again, and again, like I'm afraid we're going to see in the next films. Like I liked this cast by and large. I
Yeah.
wish they'd been given a little bit more to work with.
Right.
But they were fine. When I was clicking through some of their profiles on IMDb, a weirdly large number of these people work in voice acting and have since this thing. Weirdly enough, that my favorite example was the guy who played Donald, Jason Mikas. I don't know how to pronounce his last name.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think Micus is probably
Mikas,
right.
yes. He was the, any younger listeners may not remember this. You may, if you didn't see this. He was the voice of Bucky O'Hare.
When I heard his voice, I was like, his voice sounds familiar.
Yeah. I didn't recognize him from that. When I clicked through, it's like
I was going to say Bucky O'Hare is not one that I distinctly like. I have actually listened to a podcast where they reviewed Bucky O'Hare. But
so I'm just like a single episode.
Well, they watched all of them and they just talked about all of them like in an overview.
That feels like a better use of time, honestly. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, just to kind of give him a shout out, the principal Proctor, was played by French Tickner.
Yep. Which sounds like a fake name.
Yeah. Cause like I said, we have these actors, these obviously skilled actors who are doing well with these unfortunately very flat, very cardboard characters. Yeah. I will say, again, we jumped in and I didn't do any of my regular intros. So Ernest Goes to School did come out in 94, as we said. It was directed not by John Cherry, but by Coke Sams. In fact, this is the only film that Coke Sams directed. All the rest of them were directed by John Cherry. And I honestly think he did a pretty good job, with this film, especially for as far as I can, his only Ernest film. And, but it also, the music was by Bruce Arntzen and Kirby Shellstad once again. And it starred Jim Varney, Linda Cash, and Bill Burge, and Bruce Arntzen. I'll throw his name in there too, because, he's another one of the characters that did actually kind of stick out to me.
Yeah. Did you also say that who did the screenplay a second ago?
Oh, no, I didn't. It was written by Coke Sams and Bruce Arntzen.
Yeah.
And I think Coke Sams has a credit on pretty much all of the scripts. I know that he at least had a hand in the majority of the Ernest films.
Yeah. And in terms of him directing this one, because you're right, John Cherry directed all the others. This is Coke Sams one. I'm tempted to say that for all the other problems this has script-wise, like I could blame Coke for that.
Yeah. But again, it's more that it's just ill-defined. There are some good like sketches here, but it's really just like they saw this first or second draft and we're like, that's good enough.
Oh, it's like I said earlier, it could use a few more drafts, but I think there's some bones here that you could build up a perfectly solid Ernest movie out of, like a good Ernest movie. And the thing is, I'd have to go back and probably watch Christmas again to be fully certain of this, but I'm tempted to say this might be the best directed Ernest film, weirdly enough, because I liked some of his direction in this. The way he did montages, and some of the sped up things a few different times, the way he just the way he just handled the camera, because a lot of the other is look, the Ernest films aren't asking a lot of the director, to be perfectly honest. And getting the performances out of his actors. I mean, like I said, they're as a screenwriter, it could have done better. As a director, he's getting good performances out of the actors.
Yeah,
based on what's on the page.
Which he put was on that page. So we can't say that this was studio interference.
No,
this was independent. So yeah.
But things like the just how the football game is handled, Just some of the weird non sequitur stuff, like the cowboy, which I really wish had come back. But
Yeah, I was about to say I assumed that was going to be a running thing.
Yeah.
But no, there's a random shot which number one, Ernest on his first day can't find one of his classes. I'm like, dude, you're the custodian of the school.
He should really
you should know where all the classes are.
Yeah.
At the very least. You might now, if he was like, I don't know which class is first,
Yeah.
that I could buy.
Yes.
But to be like, I don't know where math class is.
Yes. I mean, it is the high
Really?
school. He may not know which math class he's supposed to go to.
True, I
No,
guess,
no,
but still.
but that should have been the line. It's not that he shouldn't know what math class is. It's that he doesn't know where algebra is or something.
Right. Yeah.
Also, he can mispronounce algebra. But
yeah. But yeah, that cowboy, by the way, was played by David Keith randomly.
Okay.
All right. I'm guessing you don't know who that is when I say the name.
Nope.
So David Keith.
I mean, I'm familiar
there it
with
is.
David.
Right. But David Keith had not as big of a career as Keith David,
yes,
but also was around in like the 80s. He was in an Officer and a Gentleman, Firestarter,
okay.
Even had some supporting roles in Major League 2, the 2003 Daredevil. So he's been around. He's a recognizable face.
I'm sure I've seen stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, he's Jack Murdoch. All right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, but no, I mean it. The thing is, the direction in most of the Ernest films is pretty just honestly pedestrian. It's just kind of run of the mill. You're just pointing a camera at stuff. And I thought Coke did a little bit. He at least was interesting in a couple of ways that was different from some of the other Ernest films, in my opinion.
Right.
Basically what it left me with was wishing he'd had another chance to do this.
Yeah. Yeah. Because honestly, I mean, and again, we haven't seen, some of the later films.
Yeah.
But just of, my feelings and fears towards them, I'm like.
I've read some reviews. Nathan Rabin, if you're familiar with him, just went through all the Ernest films, and man, he had some stuff to say about those last three.
Yeah.
But no, if Coke Sam's had been given, like, he obviously could have fixed the scripts for Africa, for example. But I would have liked to see him. I would have liked to see him direct Ernest Rides Again, to be perfectly honest. Maybe he could have just done.
But again, I think a lot of the issues there were the script, what was on the page.
It was, yeah.
So I don't know that he could have really fixed, the issues that we had with that one.
He could have made. I mean, one of my complaints for Ernest Rides Again was that it just didn't look very good.
Okay,
sure. And I my gut just tells me he at least could have made that a little bit better. It would have, somehow maybe framed the just writing the canon for 30 minutes. Structured the film better somehow.
Yeah.
And of course, like I said before, like I like a lot of the performances in this film, even when the characters are pretty thin, and a lot of the characters in Ernest Rides Again, it's like I picked Linda Nash so easily last time because I didn't know
Linda Cash, because there really weren't a whole lot of other choices.
No.
And she was at least giving a good performance.
Yes.
I mean, speaking of Linda Cash, let's talk about Goethe and Bobby, who we've got Bill Burge back for this film.
Yep.
This is unfortunately the last time we will see Bill Burge.
Oh, okay.
He I believe this was the last Ernest film that he did. And once again, he's playing Bobby. We don't have Chuck back, but we have Linda Cash as Goethe playing Bobby. And honestly, for a stand-in for Gaylord Sartain as Chuck, I actually thought this was a decent pair.
Yeah.
I like them. It doesn't, I mean, obviously Chuck and Bobby is still up here.
Yeah.
But, it was more defined and more fun than Tom and Bobby in Scared Stupid. That guy's really just getting away with kind of having a similar air to Gaylord Sartain.
Yep.
But the relationship between them is never really never really super well defined.
No.
And in this one, I think they play a lot with it. And Linda Cash is not trying to be Gaylord Sartain. She's not trying to be a stand-in for Chuck. She is doing her own thing. And I will say there are 2 instances where Bill Burge speaks, and I was like, ooh, we didn't need you to speak there.
Also, the first time was like he's literally introduced, and
he's like, good luck, Ernest, and I'm like, we didn't need you to say that.
No,
not that I'm begrudging Bill Burge the opportunity to speak, but I'm just the character of Bobby is defined as when he speaks, it means something.
Yeah. No,
and
I was afraid he was going to be speaking through the entire film, and was a little bit.
Oh, I was too. Yes. I was too. And then immediately, the very next moment, he's doing his typical Bobby, nodding and shaking his head, and I'm like, okay, that's a Bobby performance.
Yeah.
I will say though, the second time that he spoke, when she's like, you're gonna be and he goes, guinea pig. I was like, that's a Bobby line.
Exactly. Yeah.
That is brilliant Bobby comedic timing. Yep. That's great. But then again, at the end, when he's like, I can't remember what question she asks him, but he goes 9. I was like, no, that's not a Bobby line.
No.
So
you're absolutely right. Guinea pig is the perfect point for him to chime in.
Yeah.
And just be on the side there for the rest.
Well, because she is doing this like outrageous German accent, and I would not want Bill Burge to even try, because that's not Bobby.
No.
But that's what makes, and I think that was why they threw in the 9 line, so that he could have. But I'm like, I don't need him to be German. It's fine that they are. I mean, are they supposed to be siblings or colleagues? I think they're supposed to be siblings.
They're supposed to be siblings.
Yeah. I'm fine with Bill Burge somehow still just speaking like Bill Burge and being her brother. Yeah. I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that not making sense, with him being German, not at all.
Yeah. Nope, that works for me.
Yeah.
And in terms of Linda Cash's performance, part of what I think helps lighten any comparisons to Gaylord Sartain here is like, I don't think Gaylord Sartain would be good in this role. Like,
no, I will say, as they were establishing this, I wrote down, this reminds me of now again, Bobby's not in that one, but it reminded me of Ernest Goes to Camp.
Yeah.
And when she has that breakthrough of AC/DC power, that reminded me of the Exeronius bit.
Yeah.
Because, there's that bit in that where he's like, modeling clay, yellow modeling clay. That's the secret ingredient of Exeronius.
Yes.
That reminded me of that bit. So, I mean, you're right. I don't think that
I don't think Gaylord
playing a scientist would have. Exactly. I think that they could have still given him a character in this mold that could have worked.
Yeah.
But I mean, Linda Cash is definitely doing her own thing, and she's making it her own.
Yeah.
Which, hats off to her for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think of all of the stand-ins that we've had for in the Chuck and Bobby mold.
Yep.
This is probably my favorite of all the stand-ins.
Yeah. No, I liked her. I think I read that she's not back in Slam Dunk, but she is back, I think, for the last 2.
She's in Africa, but not in Army.
Not in Army? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Unfortunately. So, yeah, we are only getting Linda Cash one more time. Yeah. So, yeah. Yeah. But, sorry, go ahead.
What I was gonna say. In terms of that, I wrote down. I was getting very much Dr. Otto vibes off of the subatomic brain accelerator.
Sure.
That
Well,
that
one
went
of the things I wrote down is this machine looks like a machine that Ernest would have built.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm just like, okay. I mean, obviously, they're just dealing with their low production, uh, uh, their low budget.
Yeah.
But it does kind of have the same aesthetic of all of the machines we've seen Ernest build in all of the other films.
Yeah.
So I would have liked maybe, like some you know, silver plating outlining it rather than seeing all the gears and parts like we would in a typical Ernest invention.
Yeah.
But honestly, well, no, honestly, that looked like an Ernest invention too. Yeah. I don't know really what they could have done that would have, fit within their budget to make it look different, but just a different kind of aesthetic look
Yeah.
would have helped there. But what
I
are you
was
gonna do?
I admit I was fine with the design of it. I will say though, we're good to go back to our issues with like Act 1 and like characters
Mhm.
getting introduced. I wrote down like I wasn't clear who Bobby and Gerda were when they were first introduced. Like it's not established that they're science teachers or anything. They just kind of show up.
Well, they're just standing in the hallway in lab coats.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I get that they're scientists because I think that they mentioned that in some way.
Well, I mean,
But I was like, are they the science teachers or are they just random mad scientists who
hanging
are
out
in this school? Because
Yeah.
we have a random cowboy.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't put it past.
But yeah, it just goes back to the script not being good at introducing its own characters at the beginning, just to like remind you this is why these people are here. It gives almost better introductions to some of the other teachers who don't come back. Like we
No.
just established, like this person's teaching a history class or something like this.
Yeah, okay. The guy who taught the math class, he's not listed in the Wikipedia page.
Yep.
And he looks familiar to me. I know I've seen him in other things.
Yeah.
Do you have any idea who he is?
I don't remember off the top of my head. No, I wouldn't be able to place him. I mean,
Yeah.
this was apparently shot in Canada. He's certainly a Canadian actor.
Yeah, probably a Canadian actor of some
So
some
he
type.
could have shown up in any number of things. Could have shown up in some random episode of X-Files for all we know.
Sure. Yeah,
But
I just, I saw him and I was like, okay, I know this guy. And honestly, like, he has like a physicality to him that I'm like, I could have done with more of this guy. Now, some of the stuff that they do with him is not great.
Yeah.
But I just kind of like the overall like way that he's holding himself. He's obviously comes across as a professional, who knows how to deliver, some lines in a comedy. But I'm looking it up right
did he
now.
have a name?
See, that's the thing. I don't really remember him them saying his name. I just know that he was the math teacher.
IMDb has a character listed here as Mr. Peyton.
Here it is. Yeah, William Samples. That's him.
Okay.
Yeah, and let's see, what else was he in? He was in Battlestar Galactica. He was in Happy Gilmore, the BFG. So yeah, some things that you would. He was in the Flash TV series.
He was.
Yeah, he was also in an episode of
Mr. Vanderbilt. Okay.
Yeah, he was in an episode of Supernatural. So yeah, one of those guys that you'd recognize his face.
Yeah, he's just
type of thing.
Did an episode of Smallville. Yeah, again, he's a Canadian actor.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Smallville. Yeah. Which, and honestly, I mentioned before Sarah Chalk. I forget that she's Canadian.
Yep.
But this film was shot in Vancouver. In fact, apparently it was the second one shot in Vancouver, which it's not listed on the film in the Wikipedia that it was shot in Vancouver, but I can only assume that the first one to be shot in Vancouver must have been Ernest Rides Again.
Yeah, I think so.
Because Slam Dunk Ernest, I believe, is the third and final film to be shot in Vancouver.
And the
of
last were shot in
series.
South Africa.
Oh, in South Africa?
Ernest Goes to Africa and Ernest Goes to Ernest in the Army. I
In
think
the
are
Army.
both shot back to back in South Africa. I can
That's
double check that, but yeah.
interesting. They must have had like some sort of connection there.
It was basically, I think, like where they could shoot cheap. Like they had
Yeah,
to go
oh yeah, it had to be.
and Canada. Yes, it was shot
Yeah.
entirely in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Wow. I mean, obviously we'll talk more about that when we get to those films. But yeah, so I mean this
Army
one
Cape Town, South Africa, for what it's worth. Yes.
okay. So but this one was shot in Vancouver. And I mean, I don't know Vancouver, but you know, I kind of just assumed that Ernest Rides Again was shot, you know, in their typical, you know, Tennessee area.
Oh.
You know, based on some of the, you know, the shots that we got. But, you know, Vancouver, okay, cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, let's see. Is there anything else specifically about this film? You know, I'm gonna go through my notes because I didn't have my notes up for a second. And I mean, there are some moments, like honestly, the whole intro to Ernest, to this film, up until the payoff with the vacuum, very much felt like a classic Ernest film. Like I said, a lot of that was giving me Ernest Goes to Camp vibes.
Mhm.
But then all of a sudden, when the vacuum starts malfunctioning or whatever, they go into some like yakety sax music,
Yeah, I mean, I know that.
you
High
know,
Speed
and
Vacuum with
I was
jazz.
like, I
Yeah.
don't need this.
Mm.
I don't need this music. Like, and that was the first moment to me that I was like, this does not feel like a classic Ernest film. This feels like something that they're trying to now incorporate into the new Ernest films, but I don't need it. You know, I feel like this moment of Ernest dealing with this vacuum could have been fun enough on its Jim Varney does not need this silly music to make this part funny.
Yeah.
And to me, it was more, I wasn't really paying attention to what he was doing because I was distracted by this music. So to me, it was more of a con than a pro. Really didn't need it. Let's see. Oh, he goes to wrestling class. No high school has a wrestling ring. It's just a mat. You know, I get that we're in the Whirliverse.
Yeah.
You know, nothing. There's always going to be a sense of heightened reality, but there are definitely films that have more a sense of a heightened reality than others, and this is definitely, they are straining at the limits of credulity here. And
Yeah.
it's just like there are some moments that I wrote down, this is just silly, you know, and not in a funny way, just silly for the sake of being silly.
Yeah.
You
And
know,
yeah, the ring didn't affect me so much there, but the random like masked wrestler who came in, like,
yeah, which he was given a teacher's name. He's not credited.
That's what made it evil. At the time I thought, like, is this going to come back? And then again, it didn't.
Right. Yeah, but yeah, he's given like a teacher's, like they call him Mr. Coach Carson.
Coach
Yeah.
Carson.
And that's the only time he's there.
Yeah.
And yeah, he just comes in to beat up one of the students. I'm like, that doesn't seem very professional at all.
Yeah. And maybe I forgot something from the opening sequence when Ernest is walking around the campus with his plumbing box or whatever it was. But no, the thing that bothered me most, even more than just Coach Carson being a random masked wrestler, was the fact that the other wrestling coach just seemed to hate Ernest for no reason.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, I mean, like I said, the antagonists in this film are just mean to Ernest for like no discernible I mean, honestly, they've kind of, that very few of the antagonists in any of these films, when there are active antagonists,
Yeah.
are given a reason. So I'm not gonna harp on that
Oh, yeah.
too much.
Well, I don't harp on it too much. It's just the fact that I once again I felt like there was an easy opportunity to set that up. If you want to have the wrestling coach hate Ernest, that is perfectly fine.
Yeah, if we had actively seen him as one of the people that Ernest causes mayhem for in the
Exactly.
opening scene,
That's what
that
that's the setup that needed.
well, because here's the thing: one of the people that we do actually see him actively hurt in that opening sequence is Rodney, one of his friends,
Yeah.
and he's his friend.
Yeah. So yeah, come to think of it, what you should have is he somehow in the mayhem he's causing at the beginning, he
Yeah.
injures the wrestling coach sufficiently, like you think this guy probably broke his arm, you know.
Right.
When because it's hard to introduce characters by name in the course of this. You see
Yeah.
this guy, he's dressed distinctively.
But we
something happens
see
to
the
his arm.
coach.
When we come back, no, but then when we come back to the wrestling scene later, he has a cast on his arm. It's just like, okay, Ernest, yeah, you
Yeah,
gotta
that
wrestle
would
me.
have been a great, through line. Yeah,
Yes.
that would have a great connecting tissue. That would have made things make sense. I will say we haven't mentioned this yet, mostly because not a lot is done with it. But Ernest does have a love interest
He
in
does.
this film.
He does.
Miss Flugel, the band teacher, although she, without really any strong reason, gives up her post to Ernest at a certain point. But she's played by Corrine Coslow.
Coslow, yes.
And I mean, again, they don't do a whole lot with her.
Nope.
She's not given a whole lot, but she's not doing a bad job
No, she's doing fine.
here. I wrote down, oh, it seems like they're actually giving him a love interest, but they do so little with it, they might as well have not even put it in there.
Yeah. And they touch on this a little bit, I think.
Yeah.
And then don't develop it enough, which is
Right.
that she has some sort of affection for Ernest. She's just charmed by his naivete and whatnot. And then
Right.
as he becomes just a jerk.
Yeah, smart
you know,
Ernest. Then she's really,
Yeah.
I will say that was another thing about smart Ernest that I wrote down that doesn't track is
Yeah.
that people that don't know him are suddenly in love with smart Ernest.
Yep.
And then the people that knew him, which again, we barely know those people, so we're not really affected when they're offended by him. But they are like, "You're a jerk now, Ernest."
Yep.
And I'm just like, okay, we need some consistency. Like he can be like good at things, but like people still find his personality off-putting.
Yeah.
But no, a lot of the people that aren't defined as his friends like this personality too. The only ones that are well defined that are like, okay, no, Ernest is a jerk like this are Gerda and Bobby. And I'm like, okay, I need a little bit more. This feels like like we're being inconsistent rather than a character decision here, or a decision for the script.
Yeah.
I will say though, going back to the whole love interest thing, there is a gag that they do, which I've seen done in a bunch of things, but the way it's done here, honestly, the way Jim Varney does it. Jim Varney has a way of taking old stale gags, or at least gags that would become old and stale, and doing them in a way that I'm like, okay, no, that's still funny. But there's the gag, he has that dream sequence with Miss Flugel when he first sees her, and she pops up with a rose in her mouth, and then he goes away and comes back with a rose bush in his, and I'm just like, okay, yeah, no, that's funny.
Yeah. I mentioned Nathan Rabin's reviews earlier, by the way.
Yeah.
He recently finished them all, put up like a 14,000 word review of all the Ernest movies. One of his notes he made about Miss Flugel, which I thought was worth sharing, is that it's a somewhat nice touch here that when in the one and only time Ernest is given a love interest, really, she's just kind of a dowdy librarian type. Like it's not like they hired like a model or anything like.
No. Well, and see that's the thing. The nurse in Ernest Goes to Camp, she was also, I will say, I think Miss Flugel is kind of made to look kind of matronly and a little dowdy.
She is.
Here.
I looked up some pictures of her. She normally looks a little,
Yeah, yeah, and I'm like, I don't know that you
dressed her
needed to
with a
do
collar.
that for this character, but the Nurse St. Cloud in Ernest Goes to Camp. Now she was just kind of normal, but she was a normal, good-looking, woman. Then you go to Ernest Goes to Jail, and I mean that woman, Charlotte, she's very attractive.
Yeah.
She's also at least 10 years younger than Jim Varney.
Yeah.
So he definitely would have been, I mean, it's Ernest. He would have been kind of, you know, uh, you know, shooting up regardless.
Yeah, exactly.
But definite. But yeah, with this, it's almost like, is this what we think Ernest is Ernest's
Type.
his type, but not just his type, like in his oh I want to say weight class, but you know what I mean, like he's like with Charlotte, he's kind of trying to do better than him. Is this what we say is his level? Because we took someone who could look better and made them look worse and said, okay, now she's on Ernest's level. That's kind of an insult to your character, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah. I will say there's that moment after the principal's office when the principal is like, I don't think you're going to cut it, Ernest. And he's like, no, give me a chance or whatever. And he's walking down a dark hallway, and they're doing this thing with the camera where they're giving obvious like open space next to his head. And we're hearing these negative voices. I was like, I feel like there were supposed to be faces with these voices because they're trading sides each time. And because there's nothing in those spaces, we're noticing that they're moving the camera for no discernible reason. But there's no faces giving these negative voices. And so I'm like, did that just not happen in post? Did they decide not? Because the camera move, it makes it look like there's something missing here.
Yeah. Don't remember that immediately, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I noticed it as I was watching, and I was like, that's kind of an interesting thing. Oh, there's another thing. Okay, so they've got a marching band for this school. Part of this marching band is a few tubas. You cannot have tubas in a marching band. That's the whole reason for the invention of the sousaphone.
Yeah.
Because the sousaphone is basically a marching tuba. Yes. But Sarah Chalk is a tuba player. I'm like, could they just not get sousaphones? Or did they not realize? Because you can see her trying to hold it and pretend to play, and it's cumbersome.
It's unfortunately only 1994. Sousaphones had not yet reached Canada.
Apparently,
yes. Okay, what else do I got here? I'm looking down my notes. What about other things?
Right.
Well, speaking of which, to go back to like my commentary about what I like about Coke's direction for this film. Like, I liked the band sequence where Ernest basically becomes Harold Hill and like suddenly like teaches the band how to play.
Right. Yeah, I was about to say he does this thing when he becomes smart, where he's not only just smart, he just takes over the class.
Yeah.
So he's not a good student, he just becomes a teacher.
Yeah.
Like, you could just have him go get his GED and this would be faster. But okay, yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of which, in terms of like script fixing and whatnot, I wish the whole Ernest has to go back to school to get a degree because that was the rule for the school now had been
Right.
divorced a little more from the school's going to close down thing, because
Yeah, they were really kind of one in the same plot, kind
yeah,
of. Yeah.
but because it ends up creating this weird, not that we should care too much about chronology in an Ernest film, but this
Right.
weird notion that like he's going to get a degree in like a month. That because it's like the film treats it like he's done with high school by
Right.
the end though of by the end of the movie, when he's only been in high school for about a few weeks.
Right.
So because it hasn't addressed the actual problem, which was he needs a degree.
Yeah. Yeah. Which again, he could just go get his GED.
Yes.
And I get that wouldn't be as fun for the film or whatever, but it just they never reference it at all, which does kind of stick out a little bit.
Yeah, to be honest, he doesn't need to be a student. He doesn't need to be the school's janitor to begin with. He could just basically do a Billy Madison, and he just needs to go back to school for some reason.
I mean, honestly, I like the fact that he's the custodian because it gives that classic Ernest film feel.
It does, but if they're going to do that, and that's fine, they should have done more to establish his relationships with those characters before he is then their classmate.
Yeah.
We need to establish Ernest has this relationship with these kids as their janitor, and then now he's sitting in class with them.
Yeah.
The film would just be built out better that way. What do I got here? When he starts regressing from like the smart stuff, I thought that was like, I assume that was fun for Jim Varney to get to play the scenes of him going from smart to stupid, as he's losing his verbal skills.
Yeah.
Oh
yeah. Honestly, that scene was one of those scenes that I laughed out loud at.
Yeah.
When he's doing his. Honestly, it was preceded by a scene that I wrote down. I was like, that's actually funny the way that they did that, because as he's waiting to do that, we have oddly the history teacher who has one scene is given a credit on IMDb, Lorena Gale.
Okay.
I will say at first I was like, oh, is this our Jackie Welch cameo? No, she's not in this one, unfortunately. But we do have Lorena Gale playing the history teacher.
Yeah.
Why she's given a credit on Wikipedia and none of the other teachers that are in the film aren't, I don't know.
Yeah.
But she does this thing where, Ernest is obviously, he's in his smart mode and he's kind of over it. He's waiting to give his report. And she starts talking about this subject. And all of a sudden she just goes, and blah, blah, blah.
Yes.
Blah,
yes.
blah, blah. And I was just like, and the way that she did it, I was like, that's a good gag.
Yeah.
That is really good. The way that she's doing these blah, blah. I was like, yeah, great. But yeah, his giving the report as he's deprogramming. We're getting to see Jim Varney play, and that's always fun. But yeah, that was one of those scenes that I wrote down. I was like, this is genuinely funny. Made me laugh out loud.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. What else I got here?
I will say. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I forget which teacher it was.
Yeah.
But when Ernest is distracted by the fly, that he's sitting in a classroom, he's taking a test. There's a fly.
I think it was just like the administrator of the exam.
Whoever it is, the teacher administering this exam, he's distracted by this fly threat. It's after he's already lost his smarts.
Yeah.
So he can't concentrate. And then at one point, this administrator, test administrator lady, walks down his aisle, sees the fly, and just whips out like a lizard tongue.
Yeah. Which that was one of those honestly, that was one of those ridiculous moments that I was like, it was so fast.
Yeah.
I honestly can't be mad at it.
I think
it's just so weird.
I think I laughed out loud and I backed up to watch it.
Okay. Wow.
I was slightly distracted in the moment. I didn't think it was going to happen. It's like, I need to watch that again.
Yeah. And I will say one, it wasn't one that I was like, oh, that's great or anything like that. But I was just like, okay, that's very weird. I'm not mad at it because it's so weird.
Yeah.
But something I did appreciate about it is we could see how practical the tongue was. And if it was made now, it would have been a CG tongue and it would have stuck out. I mean, especially on this budget, it would have been a real cheap looking tongue.
Yeah.
But you could see the seams on this tongue, and I'm just like, okay, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I will say, one of the next things that I have written down is before that scene, actually. He loses his smarts in the middle of the band thing, and this is when we discover, because again, the football bullies who are just mean to Ernest for no discernible reason. Again, we've had characters like that before with Camp, but they eventually came around. Yes, again, we've talked about our issues with that in Camp. That's never really given its due, but they do eventually come around. These characters are never given a comeuppance. They never come around, and they actively, just for the sake of doing it, to fuck with Ernest, not just screw with Ernest. This is to fuck with Ernest. They destroy this machine.
Yeah.
Just wanton destruction.
Yes. Yeah,
This is when I wrote down, oh, so these characters are just straight up villains.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
But they destroy this machine so Ernest can't get his smarts back.
Yeah.
And, honestly, at first, he's doing pretty well, but wouldn't you know it, because he's Ernest, his cape gets caught on the sign that's rising. I will say, nothing that really happens after that is Ernest's fault, aside from the fact that he told the band to watch him while he was smart. And so they just copied everything that he did.
Yeah.
So when he falls in the tuba and is rolling on the ground, that's what they're doing too. So that was really the only thing that could be actually said to be his. I mean, obviously, as he's got the tuba on, he falls into the fireworks and everything like that. But again, he's got a tuba on his head and nobody's helping him get it off.
Yeah.
But he feels really bad. He feels dejected. And honestly, there's that scene where he finally gets the tuba off of his head and he sees what's going on and he crawls back in the tuba. And honestly, that scene could have just been played for like a sheepish laugh. But the way Jim Varney plays that, I felt bad for Ernest, because he was just like, oh, I screwed it up again. And you can hear him kind of like, kicking himself in that. And I was just like, Jim Varney can always make you feel bad for Ernest. He's just really good at that. But the scene that I distinctly wanted to talk about was the next scene when he goes to apologize to Miss Flugel. And, I can get her being, a little upset, because he had built himself way up and then he kind of let her down, blah, blah, blah. But the moment he says the line, I'm sorry, I'm me, and she just lets him go, no good teacher would let that line go without a response.
Yeah.
And I was just like, okay, I don't know if we're meant to think Miss Flugel is a bad teacher, but now I have those feelings.
Now you have issues
because as someone who works with kids myself, I know the moment a kid says it, no matter what they've been doing, the moment they say anything to put themselves down, you don't let that slide. That would be irresponsible as a teacher to let that kind of thing slide. You let them know, hey, I know you messed up, but you're not bad. And for her to just let that, and yes, I understand that he's not high school age, but he is still her student. That should just be an innate response in her as a teacher to build her student back up, and it's not. And I'm just like, I get kind of the beat you guys were going here for here, but because she's a teacher and did not respond to that statement, I now don't feel as warm towards Miss Flugel.
Yep.
But yeah, then we get, I will say, honestly, one of my other favorite bits in the film when they, again, all of a sudden Maisie's just part of this group, but they do the study session with him
Mhm.
and, them asking him all these questions and him just randomly saying pop culture references.
Yeah.
The way that he does it is really what sells it to me.
Yeah.
And that was another one of those moments where I actually had a bit of a chuck.
I made a note of that
Yeah.
montage too. I really
Yeah.
liked that. Yeah, that was I
Yeah.
thought it was well executed.
Yeah.
Lot of references to the penguin, weirdly enough.
Yeah. He. Are you sure it's not the penguin? And I was just like, yeah, like just that kind of because it's not just that he's throwing out pop culture references.
Yeah.
It's the references that he's
Yes,
doing.
exactly. Yeah.
Because it's like, okay, I can tell that this is a man, from that was born when Jim Varney was born, because the references that because when he says the penguin, he's talking about Burgess Meredith's penguin.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And for him to bring that up twice, I'm like, yes.
Yep.
Yes.
I have here in my notes one of my favorite specific lines in this film came shortly after that scene.
Yeah.
Which is one, I think I only wrote down 2 quotes here, I think. One of which you used half of it earlier was when Bobby said guinea pig and Gerda corrected him with mental pioneer for using the brain accelerator.
Sure.
I like that turn of phrase. And also the other one also came from Goethe when there was some mention made about instead of using Ernest to experiment upon on their brain accelerator, couldn't they get a chimp? And her answer was, we can't afford a chimp.
Yeah. 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 I will say, maybe you can help me out with this.
Sure.
I wrote down, and this is after the band switches with the football team.
Yeah.
But I wrote down team dancing funny. So obviously I thought that this moment was funny, but I can't specifically remember the moment that I was talking about.
In the football game?
Yeah.
Okay, there's a bit in the football game when the band players have all
when they're the football team
uniforms that they are playing the football game, and during one of the hikes of the ball, someone puts on music. I don't remember exactly how they do it, but they put on
there's a point at which there's music under all of the
it, but
plays.
specifically someone, I think maybe up in the booth, I forget exactly how it. I don't know if it's honestly, it might not be diegetic music in the film.
Sure. Okay.
But you end up with like ballroom dancing music playing, and the band members just like
yes, and they just start. Oh yes, that was. I loved that moment. Yes. I'm so glad you reminded me of that. Yes. That because honestly, half of the things that they do to get the score back, I'm like, there's no way that would work because, they'd have to get the other team involved. But yeah, them just randomly starting to dance with the other team. Yeah, I thought that was hilarious.
No, I frankly, I'll go ahead and say this. I frankly loved the entire football game.
The football game itself was, I especially after the band takes over. I will say,
yes, I'll be clear. The second half of the football game.
Yeah, I will say one of the things I kept writing down though, because it comes up even before the football game, is okay. I get how this machine could maybe give Ernest an understanding of football.
Yeah.
But how it makes him super athletic, I don't get that at all.
I don't care. It does it the same way that Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes is an expert boxer. It's just,
sure.
It gives it really good reflexes and hand-eye coordination. Who knows?
Yeah.
But no, I wrote down that the second half of this football game is basically Looney Tunes, and
it's a lot of fun. I will say though, there was one bit where the last play where Ernest jumps on the drum and rides it down. The way that was introduced was almost like it was like we had seen him walk on the drum already.
Yeah.
Like it was introduced like it was an established gag. Like we know what's going to happen here now.
Yeah.
And I was like, again, I feel like something was cut. I wonder how much of what we're missing is due to the editor. I mean, unfortunately, the editor is not something that's often. Oh no, edited by Chris Ellis. So I don't know if Chris Ellis cut some of the connecting material in some of this and just decided that it didn't matter. I will say in this gag specifically, it doesn't matter a lot because if we've seen it before, or if we haven't, it still works. But it does kind of like I said, the cinematic language that they're using makes it seem like, oh, we recognize this and we don't.
I didn't get that same feel that we were supposed to have recognized this from somewhere else. What I did take away though was that, and this honestly could have been fixed in editing, was that however they shot Varney up on the drum, it's like, it's a funny gag. This is how he's getting away from the ball players. He doesn't seem to be moving very quickly though, so it's not entirely why is this better than just running?
Well, and they also already established that there's only 3 seconds left on the clock.
Yeah. So what not sitting here thinking about it, what that needed, I think, is just to comedically speed up the film or something like that. Just, it doesn't matter how fast Varney actually rode that drum. Yeah. But like once he's up there, it's just like, oh, he was just fast on the drum. Like that's why that works as a bit. But that's what irked me, because like this seems to be slowing him down, honestly, more than anything. I mean, to some extent, it impairs the other football players from tackling him, but so I like the visual of it, but it just I don't think the gag was thought through sufficiently to execute it.
Sure. Yeah, I will say, and I'll ask you in a second, but one of the other things that I do want to mention is, and we briefly talked about it before, but Bruce Arntzen as Chick Hansen, the guy kind of commentating on the game. I find him, again, he's not meant to have much character outside of him, but I found him actually pretty entertaining at points.
Yeah, he was.
And really kind of enjoyed what he was doing with this whole thing. But yeah, I just was out of all of the he was another one of those that I was like, at least he sticks out to me. I mean, there wasn't a whole lot else to it, but at least he stuck out to me.
No, he's it's a pretty thankless role. I suppose he must introduce himself by name, but no, he had charisma and character, and bringing more to it than what was on the page. So
absolutely. Well, is there anything else about the film that you want to talk about before we move into segments?
No, that's about it. What do you have any other notes here? I didn't, to some extent, I didn't like when Ernest took off his football uniform and it just was wearing his old like vest and hat and stuff.
Oh, okay.
I really liked it when Ernest was wearing the old school like 1920s football helmet.
Sure.
To be clear, he's wearing it over his baseball cap.
Oh yeah, and I never actually showed this, but I do have this thing of Smart Ernest.
Yeah, Smart Ernest. Yes.
I will say I thought it was funny. We're introduced to that look just in a bit. The moment he turns into Smart Ernest, he's just automatically wearing those clothes.
Yeah.
Which I thought was funny.
He already has a collared shirt, a collared long
and a tie, and and everything. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It's a nice touch. I don't think I said this earlier. I had this in my notes that when I mentioned the subatomic brain accelerator that Gerda and Bobby have built to make Ernest smart. That I was getting very Dr. Otto vibes off that. Did I say that?
Yes, you did.
Okay, yeah. Because I could be honest, I think that goes with I got some of those same visuals from the TV show. A little bit for some of the things, and I did see that Coke Sam's directed some of that. So they never did another movie, so that might have been some of that influence. Let's see. Yeah, I wish the cowboy had been recurring. I literally wrote down, this better be recurring. And then
Yeah, I mean, because it was just so random that it needed some stability to
Yeah.
like make it work.
I don't
I
necessarily.
mean, if there had just been, what I did actually kind of admire about that is that as how they committed to that bit,
Yes.
because just all of a sudden, randomly,
Yeah.
there is a, not just a cowboy, but a Western set at the end of this hallway.
Yes.
And we're seeing, fences in the
Yeah.
middle of the hallway.
Right, not just, but also when the camera
Because
turns
he's
back
on a
around-
full horse.
He's on
when
a
we
full
see
horse.
him.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
When the camera turns back on Ernest, like the lockers are still there, but there's like Western
There's some
accoutrement on
fencing
the
and
floor.
stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. No,
I did appreciate that.
Yes, and to be fair, I don't need like a rule of 3 with the cowboy necessarily. I don't need the cowboy to pay off in any way, but it's just like after the football game, for instance, after he wins, it'd be cool to see like the Cowboys there in the distance telling him like thumbs up or something. Not a thumbs up, literally, but just like the Cowboys telling him you did a good job, Ernest.
Right.
Just to call back to that. Yeah, that's about it, I think.
All right. Well, then I think it is time to go ahead and move into our segments. So we are going to start with our moment. This is, of course, the moment in the film that was either our favorite or most interesting moment of the film. And Loren, I'm going to go ahead and let you start. So what was your moment?
Okay, so as it was happening, I really loved the band scene when Ernest was taking different instruments, playing them, demonstrating to the kids how to play Sousa.
Sure.
I thought that scene had a lot of energy. I really enjoyed it. It was fun. It annoyed me a little bit as a high school clarinet player that he wasn't even trying to like. He didn't understand like how a clarinet was played at all. So it was just like randomly moving.
I will say that one's featured the least, though. So I think that they recognized, okay, he doesn't really know how to play this one, so we're not going to feature it. But
that's fair.
But,
like again, I don't know how to play a trumpet. And how those valves work is kind of random. Like if you don't know how to do it, clarinets just they do go up and down. So like there should be an order. Anyhow, but I like that scene. Nonetheless, as much as I did enjoy that scene in the moment, I have to go with the second half of the football game because, like I said earlier, it was just chock full of straight up Looney Tunes energy, and I love that. I maybe I did see this at some point in the past and have just forgot it. Maybe I saw a YouTube video. Maybe it was on ES one day. I don't know.
Yeah,
but
I mean, but it was specifically so you could have just come in at the end of this film.
The thing is,
somebody else was watching it or something.
A lot of the football game felt familiar. Nothing in the first half of this.
Nothing
film.
else.
Absolutely nothing did.
Yeah.
And to be honest, some of the other stuff, like the stuff that was cutting away from the football game towards the end of the film felt a little familiar.
See, oddly, the football
not familiar enough that I could predict as it was coming.
Sure.
But
oddly for me, the football game did not seem familiar, which makes me think that I might have actually stopped after they'd done the study session, because that was one of the last things. Well, that after he took the test, I think were the last things that were familiar to me.
That you were watching at some point on video or on TV and you just turned it off and left.
Possibly.
But no, that second half of the football game, like I said, that's the energy I want from this film. From an Ernest film, it was a live action cartoon, and it was just great, and it helped, like I said earlier, overall improve my opinion of the film because it just ended strongly, in that way.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was easily my moment.
Sure, and I will say something I really just thought of is that I don't know if it was just the way that it was filmed or what. But even though I think it actually had a wider theatrical release, this film felt less cheap than Ernest Rides Again.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
To me.
Yes.
And I don't know if maybe some of that was Coke Sam's direction, that he just knew how to work within this budget better than John Cherry.
It's certainly just on a flat level directed better than Ernest Rides Again.
Yeah.
No question.
Um,
But even just like the film, I don't know if it's the film quality, but it just looks better on screen than,
yeah.
you know,
Yeah. No, honestly, Ernest Rides Again has that.
it's cheap.
Honestly, that kind of higher frame rate PBS look
Yeah.
to it,
Yeah.
whereas this one looks like the typical films.
Yeah. I could have. Ernest Rides Again looks so much like a cheap direct-to-video movie. I could see why it did not do well in theaters. It would look
Yeah.
terrible on a big screen. I think this would look fine on a big screen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not surprised that this didn't like bring it back or something.
Well, no, I
But,
understand.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so for my my moment, I talked about my favorite scenes in this. It's definitely between the Ernest report,
Mhm.
the study session, and the team dance.
Yeah.
Now, the team dance is really part of the football game, so you kind of already gave it to that, so I'm going to leave that one. And also, it was the one that when I couldn't remember what I was talking about based on my notes. When you said it, I was like, "Oh yeah, no, that was funny."
Yeah.
But yeah, based on my notes, I couldn't remember. I will say, I really like the whole devolving into everything, especially when we throw in the teacher blah blah and all that kind of good stuff. But I think ultimately I am going to give it to the study session just because that is a thing that I think a lot of people could have done, not as funny. And I think Jim Varney distinctly, the way that he did that scene made it funny, made that work.
Yeah.
And I mean, yes, his that's very Varney as well. But I think we've seen that in other movies. This felt kind of unique for this movie, but uniquely Varney as well. So I think I'm going to give it to the study session as my moment. So now it is time to give out the Neldy Award. And the Neldy Award is, of course, the character or sometimes characters that were our favorite or most interesting characters in the film. So Loren, again, you don't have a lot to work with, but who would you say has earned your Neldy Award?
All right. So, I mean, on the one hand, this does give us more than Ernest Rides Again, which was just a dearth of.
I mean, honestly, we just had to bring it down to who we thought was doing the best job.
Yeah.
Not necessarily the performance we liked the most.
Who earned their paycheck.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there were, like I said earlier, I think a lot of the actors are doing a solid enough job with what they've been given to do.
Yeah.
I noticed, I think it was his name, Gabe, who plays Rodney.
Rodney. Gabe Kuth. Yeah.
I think that's his interestingly enough, like I mentioned on IMDb, like 3 different people who were in this movie, like the opening credits spell their names wrong.
Oh geez. Wow.
Sarah Chalk's last name is misspelled. Gabe has his name as Gaber.
Oh yeah, I don't think they use the E in Chalk.
No, they leave the E off.
Yeah.
It's just like classroom chalk.
Yeah.
Kevin McNulty, they don't capitalize the N apparently. Like someone was just sloppy and not proofreading the credits. Anyhow.
Yeah.
But Gabe. He specifically I wrote down that he had like a Will Friedle energy from like Boy Meets World.
Will Friedle. Okay, yeah.
Something about his performance reminded me of that. If he'd been given more to do.
I was about to say, I think that they missed the boat on his character because honestly, a lot of the things that we did see from him, I was like, okay, this guy could be interesting.
He was good.
But
he did everything.
He just made it into the back. I think the whole fact that we had Donald sidelined him too much. See, now I wonder if maybe they brought in Donald because maybe Rodney wasn't available as much as they wanted.
Yeah, I mean,
Because I don't think there are a lot of scenes. A lot of those scenes that we see with Donald are just Donald and Ernest.
yeah, true.
So I do wonder if maybe
Yeah.
he just wasn't available on those
So
days.
he had some nice energy there, but he wasn't really given an awful lot to do. So
Yeah.
at the end of the day, and like we mentioned earlier, principal's good.
Yeah.
Other folks are fine.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I think I almost made this prediction last time. Is I'm going to once again give my LD to Linda Cash as Goethe, because she is very precisely bringing the right energy I want to this film.
Yeah.
She knows the just the right level to be at, to play off of Jim Varney for what
She always knows what film she's in
he does.
and levels her performance in the right way.
Yeah, she is keyed in perfectly to what this comedy needs.
Yeah.
And she's giving
it's crazy and a little over the top, and so is she. It just fits right in. Now, would that character have fit in some of the previous Ernest films? It might have been a little much, but she wasn't in those. She's in this one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. No, yeah, I mean, yeah, she would have been out of place in like Ernest Saves Christmas, for instance. But no.
Even Ernest Goes to Jail, I think it would have been a little, and definitely Camp. It would have been a little over the top.
Mad German scientist and Ernest Scared Stupid, by all means. Bring
Yes.
it. That's
Do
fine.
it. Do it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Give us a scene between Linda Cash and
And Eartha Kitt?
Eartha Kitt.
My God. That would have been great.
Yes.
Now I really wish we had seen that.
Yes.
Jeez.
She could have had a machine like if we want to keep her as a German scientist for no reason.
I've invented the troll eradication machine. Yeah, that would have been great.
So yes, my Neldy award goes to Linda Cash as Goethe.
Nice. Okay. All right. So I will say, going into this, honestly, I really wanted to be able to say that I was giving it to Sarah Chalk, because I have a crush on Sarah Chalk. She's been in some of my favorite shows, Scrubs, How I Met Your Mother, things like that. And I just think that she is hilarious, a great performer, and also a beautiful human being. Let's just be honest. But like I said, they didn't really. I mean, her character is so ill-defined. She's given literally 2 different definitions, and it really doesn't matter because neither one of them mean anything.
When she was first introduced as a band member, I honestly thought she was just going to be like a background player. Like she was just the object of his affection, and we weren't really going to meet her. And when she shows up later, like, is a character, like, okay.
Again, I wonder how much of this was just based on, the character we actually wanted to use wasn't available today, so we're going to throw this character in instead.
Just writing it on the fly.
Yeah.
Although
but
it is really important. It does pay off to have her in this script in the football game when she flirts with the quarter, whoever the other player is.
Again, that moment was so ridiculous, but I was like, for this movie, it works.
No, exactly. That's what I want out of this. Like, like you said, heightened reality. I want a heightened reality football game there.
Well, especially because literally from we see her from the football player's point of view, kind of. From where he is, she just looks like a football player that's waving at him like this. And he comes over already smitten. I'm like, it's only when you get close to her can you see. I mean, again, Sarah Chalk is a very, I mean, I will say at this point, I think she was like maybe early 20s, if not like in her teens.
Yeah.
Let's see. She was born in 70s. So she would have been 18 when they made this film.
Yeah.
So, a beautiful young woman, but when she's wearing football gear and a helmet, it kind of hides, the more attractive sides of her. You have to get very close to see her. Yes, to see those eyes. But like I said, I thought that whole bit was funny. But yes, like I said, I can't give it to her. I do want to give an honorable mention to Bruce Arnson
Yeah.
as Chick Hansen because, like I said, you know, his character was really just like he was just the announcer for the game,
Mhm.
but he was one of the most well-defined characters in the whole film for
Yeah.
me. But what I actually have to do, and I am going to be doubling up here, I am going to give my Neldy Award to Goethe and Bobby.
Okay.
So, because again, I felt like, um, again, they're not Chuck and Bobby,
Yeah.
but they're also not trying to be. Bobby is still Bobby. Bobby is always Bobby. And honestly, I don't ever need Bill Burge to give me any more than Bobby.
Yeah.
Because he's great as Bobby. But, Gerda's, as we said, she's not trying to be Chuck. She is doing her own thing, and it's working. Of the, kind of stand-ins, this is probably my favorite stand-in. And they are an entertaining duo. We still at least get one, famous, classic Bobby line, guinea pig, in that classic Bill Burge delivery. Again, he does a couple of things that don't work, but that's not his fault. I'm pretty sure that was just in the script or directed to do so. Excuse me. And he did what he could to make that work. But yeah, I have to give it to both of them because I do see them as a duo.
Mhm.
And this is unfortunately the last time we're going to see Bobby
Yeah.
in these films. So, just want to go ahead and give it to him one last time as a shout out. Thank you, Bill Burge. You were magnificent. So
Yeah.
yes, my Neldy Award goes to Goethe and Bobby.
Good choice.
All right, so now we are down to the question. The most important question, the question so important that Ernest himself never stopped asking it. And it is this: Loren, when it comes to this film, Ernest Goes to School, do you or do you not know what he means, Vern?
I said back on Ernest Scared Stupid, I was afraid this was going to be the last time. That was going to be the last time I would get to say that I knew what he was doing.
Right.
And I was pleasantly surprised that no, I liked this film. Like
Yeah.
there are problems. We've discussed it, but I think they were fixable by and large.
Yeah.
I think that this was basically just like I said, a drafting issue. Could have been
Right.
polished up. But the central premise here for the film, strong for an Ernest film. I think the bones of a good, decent story that are there. They
Yeah.
had a good cast to work with.
Yeah.
Most of that cast is giving good performances.
Agreed.
I maintain I thought Coke Sam did a fine job with the direction. Might have done a little bit better job with the script, but
Yeah.
with things like directing the football game, with things like
Sure.
directing like you mentioned, the studying montage,
Right.
the atmosphere he gave to the cowboy scene,
Mhm.
the band sequence I mentioned earlier when
Mm.
he's doing his Music Man bit.
Yeah.
Those just felt like they had a little more texture to them than I've seen from some of the other Ernest films.
Sure.
And I wish he'd gotten, like I said, another opportunity to do something.
Sure.
And so, and again, when we got to the final third of the film and it was mostly football game, I was enjoying it. I was thoroughly enjoying this film.
Sure.
So could it be better? Oh yes,
Yeah.
but compared to what we've already seen,
Yeah.
compared to what we're going to see,
Yeah.
and compared to what, like, again, I'm expecting out of an Ernest film, which is
Right.
going to be just like, is it entertaining? Is it sort of family friendly? Or would the kids laugh at it and whatnot? It's like, no, this was perfectly solid.
Yeah.
It So yes, at the end of the day, yes, I know what he meant. I liked it. I might give it like, I don't know, 3 out of 5 or something like that. But
Sure. It's still like honestly, if this was one of my other podcasts, I'd probably say a low cow.
yeah,
It's not amazing, but it's also not bad.
I
I'm
didn't want to turn it off, for instance. Yeah, it's
right.
like,
Yeah.
what? Not like when we watch like Hey Vern and Ernest. It's like, how much more of this do I have to sit through? It's like, no, this is
All of
pleasant.
it.
Like, this was a decent hour and a half of my
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, honestly, I feel very similar. Honestly, like I said, the things I was writing down was this is likable.
Yeah, likable
It's
word for it. Yeah,
it's pleasant. Yeah,
yeah,
honestly, I felt like likable was the best term for it. Because again, as we said, it's not hitting the ball out of the park. It's not amazing, but it is, there's not anything so annoyingly grating like in Ernest Rides Again. There's, you know, I definitely think that the positivity uh, you know, is more what I'm left with than the negative stuff.
yeah.
As you said, it could have been tighter, it could have been stronger, it could have made a little bit more sense. Honestly, I think this one is kind of maybe a step below, but not much below Ernest Scared Stupid.
Yeah.
I think that we're kind of on par with where
That's
that
not
film
fair.
was.
It obviously doesn't have the budget that Ernest Goes.
No, which is why I would give Ernest Scared Stupid kind of the nod if I was going to give either one of them the nod over it. But it is, like we said, it is pleasant, it is likable. There are some good gags in it. Like I said, there were at least 3 that I laughed out loud.
Yeah.
Which, I honestly can't even be said of all like good comedies.
Yeah.
For me. So, that is, there is something to be said for that. So yes, I agree. I do ultimately know what he means. All right. So, with all of that being said, I want to go ahead and give everyone the opportunity to get into contact with us. You can, of course, contact us at the Flying Cow Pod on Twitter and Instagram. You can also email me at the Flying Cow Pod on gmail.com. You guys are patrons, so you know all about the Patreon, patreon.com/the Flying Cow. It's where you're getting this podcast, but don't forget to check out all of the other podcasts we have. Discussions, Nostalgia Cow, Flying Cow's movie list. The Academy is coming back very soon. Not this month, but I think it will be next month by the time this is released. So remember to check that out. We're doing the films of 1930. And of course, don't forget to check out the YouTube channel to catch up on movie battles. We've got 2 full seasons over there for you to watch. Loren, anything you want the people to know about?
Can find me online at on Twitter. Again, it continues to exist at
Yeah.
Collins.
Still trekking.
Still trekking. If anyone's out there in the Atlanta metro area, I am going to be starting the for the latter half of April. I am in Guys and Dolls out at Players Guild at Sugar Hill. So come see and enjoy live theater if you can.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, like I said, thank you to everyone who is listening and or watching. And thanks as always to my co-host Loren. We will be back next time talking about the next film in this franchise, Slam Dunk Ernest. Aren't you looking forward to this one, Loren?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, like I said, we will be back next time with that. Until that time, though, moo. Know what I mean?
Mm.